Testing, testing, yes.
Entre más alto el palo, más profunda la raíz. Entre más alto el palo, más profunda la raíz. Si conoces tu historia, mi hermano, no serás infeliz. Si conoces tu historia, mi hermano, no serás infeliz. Quien tuviera la virtud para cantar tu melodía, quien tuviera la virtud para cantar tu melodía, ay, yo sanaría mis dolores que el viento se llevaría, ay, yo sanaría mis dolores que el viento se llevaría. Entre más alto el palo, más profunda la raíz. Entre más alto el palo, más profunda la raíz. Si conoces tu historia, mi hermano, no serás infeliz. Si conoces tu historia, mi hermano, no serás infeliz. Entre más alto el palo, más profunda la raíz. Entre más alto el palo, más profunda la raíz. Si conoces tu historia, mi hermano, no serás infeliz. Si conoces tu historia, mi hermano, no serás infeliz. Entre más alto el palo, más profunda la raíz. Entre más alto el palo, más profunda la raíz. Si conoces tu historia, mi hermano, no serás infeliz. Si conoces tu historia, mi hermano, no serás infeliz. Entre más alto el palo, más profunda la raíz. Entre más alto el palo, más profunda la raíz. Si conoces tu historia, mi hermano, no serás infeliz. Si conoces tu historia, mi hermano, no serás infeliz.
Yo solo quiero probar un pedacito de justicia. Yo solo quiero tomar solo un traguito de dignidad. Ya conocí la tristeza, el llanto, el odio, el racismo, pobreza, separo, amargura, desprecio, maltrato, más nunca más.
Consideración. Ella que me puso en la militancia. Y es su poesía. Dice, tú puedes grabar algo pequeño solo para después pasar para ella. Creo que a ella va a gustar. Pero no. También las personas van a grabar. No es una. Pero sí.
Un canto por la América Unida. Mira, que lo escuchan allá arriba. ¡Vamos! Somos la tierra, somos la silla, la esperanza que brota y germina. 500 años nos han pisoteado, aquí seguimos, de aquí no nos vamos. América, 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 lindísimo continente se levanta, pueblo unido que no calla. América, 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 lindísimo continente se levanta, pueblo unido que no calla. Pueblo latino, vamos para adelante, tumbando fronteras, somos gigantes, nadie se rinde, vamos para arriba, esa tierra es tuya y también es mía. Pueblo mestizo, guerrero y solidario, aquí nadie es extraño, aquí somos hermanos. Todos los países digan presente, Venezuela y Cuba presente, Nicaragua, Honduras presente, el Caribe entero. América, 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 un continente se levanta, un pueblo unido que no calla, no se detiene. América, 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 un continente se levanta, un pueblo unido que no calla.
Soy Tupacatari, soy hueca y puro, 5 siglos resistiendo el atropello y el abuso. El ambiental reflorece junto al alba, sin un solo continente porque rayos nos separan. Con Sucre y Bolívar seguimos pa'lante, pa' encima la
Come over and get to know each other. Conspire, oppressed peoples of the world. There is only trash left. Look into the mirror of time and see all the misery that has been woven.
Lleguen, conozcan, conspiren los oprimidos de esta tierra. Solo ha quedado la basura. Miren en el espejo del tiempo que la miseria ha bordado.
Cheguem, conheçam, conspirem, conspirem os oprimidos dessa terra, que só o lixo restou. Olhem no espelho do tempo que a miséria bordou.
And suddenly, from the dry leaves, life blossoms, light breaks through. Those who believe, seek, and are contagious. Bring others to bear witness, to feel, to join in the excitement, and to live the fertile soil of hope sowed. Our grateful Mother Earth gives us in her embrace sweet refuge.
De repente de la hoja seca, germinó la vida, germinó la luz. Quien cree, busca, contagia, trae otros para ver, para sentir, emocionarse, vivir. La tierra fértil de la esperanza sembrada, la madre tierra agradecida, nos da en sus brazos dulce refugio.
E eis que da folha seca brotou vida, brotou luz. Quem acredita busca, permeia, traz outros e outras para ver, para sentir, se emocionar, viver. E a terra fértil da esperança plantada, a terra-mãe agradecida, nos fornecem em seus braços doce guarita.
We are on alert. We are vigilant. The chains we cultivate are of solidarity, and they will not be broken in the first hurdle.
Estamos atentos, atentas, vigilantes, y las cadenas que cultivamos son de solidaridad. No se rompen en la primera valla.
Estamos atentos, vigilantes, e as correntes que cultivamos são de solidariedade. Não se quebram na primeira grade.
Our voices have the masses who sing and chant, who reclaim the land, our name, and liberation. It reverberates in the countryside and the cities, sowing the seeds wherever there are people, wherever there is hunger. Hope has the name of liberation.
Nuestra garganta tiene una multitud que grita y canta y que reconquista. La tierra, el nombre y la libertad, que resuena en el campo y en la ciudad, y siembra la semilla. Donde quiera que haya gente, donde quiera que haya hambre. Y la esperanza tiene el nombre de libertad.
Nossa garganta tem uma multidão que grita, que canta e que reconquista. A terra, o nome e a liberdade, que ecoa no campo, ecoa na cidade, joga sementes. E onde quer que haja gente, e onde quer que haja fome, e a esperança tenha um nome de liberdade.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today with us as we open the People's Summit for Democracy 2022. My heart is so full seeing this room packed today. Thank you all for spending your week with us. I just wanted to begin with a few announcements. All sessions will have interpretation in English and Spanish. The interpreting equipment is for anyone who does not communicate comfortably in those languages. You can pick them up at the interpretation table over there. Over there. If you need to get equipment, you can find the table just right to the left of me. If there's any problem with your equipment, go to the equipment table or ask one of the monitors for support.
Bienvenidos y bienvenidas a la Cumbre de los Pueblos por la Democracia. ¡Que vivan los pueblos en lucha! ¡Que viva la resistencia! Antes de comenzar, queremos dar algunos anuncios importantes. Todas las sesiones de esta Cumbre de los Pueblos tendrán interpretación al inglés y al español. El equipo de interpretación es para cualquier persona que no se comunique cómodamente en esos idiomas. Si necesitas conseguir equipo, lo encontrará en la mesa de entrada. Si hay algún problema con su equipo, diríjase a la mesa de equipos o pida ayuda a uno de los monitores de sala.
Thank you, Manolo. So once again, thank you all for being here with us. My name is Sheila Shao, and I am an organizer with the Answer Coalition. And we would like to begin by opening up the space by acknowledging and honoring that we are standing here on stolen land, on stolen Tongva land, and we are here today because we all feel urgently about the destruction of this planet. We feel urgently about the constant drive towards war. We feel urgently about the displacement of indigenous people, of working class people, for the sake of profits. And we feel urgently about the future of our humanity. As we open up the People's Summit for Democracy, we do so following in the tradition of resistance of our indigenous ancestors. The significance of this coming together is because we are fighting against the exclusive Summit of the Americas, the summit of the rich and powerful. And we are sick and tired of the rich and powerful dictating the fate of our lives. And we are sick and tired of the US government waging destruction across the continent, in our city, across the world. And we want dignity and we want humanity. And more importantly, we want to live in a world without bigotry, without oppression, deportations, misogyny, racism. And this is, in fact, today, what we're doing here today is having the Summit of Inclusion.
Because this is the People's Summit. This is an international meeting of friends, of comrades, of all those who believe in the international struggle for justice with dignity and peace. We've come together from all corners of our continent. Biden's summit is a failure. It has excluded the people of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. It has also excluded millions of working and poor people of this continent. It has excluded our women. It has excluded our black and indigenous peoples. It has excluded all those who make this continent what it is. But we are here present at the People's Summit for Democracy. We want to honor and recognize the presence here of delegations that are coming from Venezuela, from Colombia, Honduras, Costa Rica, México, Argentina, Bolivia, Puerto Rico, Brasil. And because this struggle is international, because we are building friendships with the peoples across the world, we also want to recognize that we have delegations here with us from Palestine, from Ghana, from South Africa, and joining us through live stream, we have people from all over the world. Hundreds and thousands are connecting to what we are doing for the next 3 days. As we start these days, also remember that this is not an event. This is not a one-time gig, but what we are trying to build is an international force to save the planet and to save humanity. Are you with me to save the planet and save humanity? It's either capitalism or it's us. We have to make a choice. And I think the people of this room have made quite a loud choice already. We are here for the collective project of liberation.
I wanted to take this moment to thank some of the folks who have been helping out with this event. First of all, I wanted to thank our interpreters. We want to thank the amazing team of interpreters. Without interpretation, this summit would not be possible. Thank you to our language justice co-coordinators, Alexia and Elena, working alongside an incredible language justice team interpreting English, Spanish, Portuguese, and ASL. They're accompanying us throughout all 3 days, and make sure to thank them when you have a chance. They're over there on that side. I'd also like to thank the steering committee organizations that helped pull this summit together. Alba Movimientos, AFT 1521, the Answer Coalition, Carecen, Cheerla, Code Pink, International People's Assembly, Labor Against Racism and War, Los Angeles Tenants Union, Endalon, the People's Forum, the Poor People's Campaign California, Unión de Vecinos, and lastly, SEIU Local 721.
There's a longer list of groups, organizations, trade unions, people's movements, cultural organizations from across the continent that have also joined in organizing the summit. The list is too long. I want you to give a round of applause for the over 250 organizations that have endorsed this People's Summit. We are our enemy's worst nightmare. Poor people, working people, Black and Indigenous and Latino people, immigrants, all working people coming together to fight. That is their worst nightmare. We have an amazing group of volunteers here today. You'll be seeing them around with their yellow badges. Some of them will be doing security work. Some of them will be giving you water, food, coffee. Make sure to say hello to them. Ask them their name. They might be of one of those 200 different organizations that are here working with us today. We also want to thank, very importantly, the American Federation of Teachers, Local 1521, for inviting us onto this campus. The students, the staff of LA Trade Tech, a dear friend, I don't know if he's around, Rafael, who's been working with us every day for the last 4 or 5 months building this summit here on campus. We want to share some guidelines because, as we all know, only people who are organized can win. Are you with me? If we are organized, we can win. And our organization has certain guidelines. We ask that when you're indoors in this space, you wear a mask. It's important to keep each other safe. There are also many seats here. We have given enough space for folks to have some space in between them. We want you to be safe. We want you to be COVID-free for the remainder of this People's Summit. Also, if you haven't registered already, please visit the registration desk. We want to get to know you. We want to say hello. We want to smile at you. And also, if you have any questions, the registration desk is the first place to go. Again, because this event, we are inspired by the movement for language justice, we want to guarantee that everyone not only can listen, but everyone can participate in both English and Spanish. If you need a device, go to the registration table and get a translation device.
I also wanted to go over just a few of our community guidelines, just so that we can all be on the same page and engage in fruitful discussion and debate together. Debate and discussion is a part of our program, and we seek unity through our shared values and by uplifting the voices of the people to imagine a new world, one that puts people's democracy first. So, with that said, we expect everyone to take this time to seek out opportunities to learn, grow, collaborate, and we ask that debate and discussion be conducted in a respectful and thoughtful manner. And to that end, everyone must show respect for one another's minds, bodies, respect for one another's ideas and cultures, and take care and responsibility for ourselves, our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual needs. We will not tolerate racism, sexual harassment, misogyny, homophobia, and transphobia. And finally, as guests of Los Angeles Trade Tech College, we pledge to take responsibility for maintaining and taking care of this space, leaving our collective space in a better shape than we found it. They're taking really, really good care of us here, so let's keep our environment clean. Thank you.
Who has a program for the People's Summit? Raise your hand if you've gotten a program. There'll be many exciting conversations happening. Check the program out. If you want to check out some art, there's an amazing art tent with art produced by over 60 artists from LA, the United States, and across Latin America. We also have a People's Fair close to the stage on that end that has information tables and booths from many of the different organizations that are helping to build this People's Summit. The next days will be of a lot of activity. But to give a real start to our People's Summit, to fight against the spirit of exclusion that the official summit has created, we are honored today to welcome a dear comrade who's visiting us from the plurinational state of Bolivia. A dear comrade. I call him a comrade because he is someone who has proved himself in the terrain of struggle. Comrade Andrónico, a leader of the movement towards socialism and vice president of the 6 federations of the tropics of Cochabamba, is here to speak with us today and give a greeting to the People's Summit. Can we have a large round of applause for Comrade Andrónico? When we say that this is a people's summit, we're talking about a united effort of the peoples of our continent, from north to south and south to north. Compañero Andrónico, te damos la bienvenida en nombre de los pueblos en lucha dentro de este imperio violento. Te damos la bienvenida porque eres fiel representante de las luchas de nuestro continente, nuestro americano. Bienvenido, hermano y compañero.
Muchísimas gracias, Manolo, a todos los organizadores de esta cumbre de los pueblos por la democracia. Me complace de manera infinita estar presente en este gran evento y algo que destaco de sobremanera, la presencia de muchos jóvenes de diferentes países de nuestra América. Quiero extenderles el saludo a nombre del Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia. Hemos estado presentes en el encuentro parlamentario organizado por Parlaméricas, dejando y dando a conocer los últimos sucesos que en Bolivia se ha cometido a partir del inicio de esa estrategia sigilosa en Bolivia que ha desembocado en un golpe de Estado del 2019. Para nosotros es un alto honor estar presente en este gran evento porque consideramos de muchísima importancia que todos los pueblos definitivamente nos organicemos con el fin de materializar la unidad en la práctica para lograr las grandes victorias. Es lo que nosotros compartimos nuestra experiencia a partir del comandante Fidel, Chávez, Kirchner, Lula. Fidel, bueno, en su momento por supuesto, desde Cuba, en nuestro país, a través de nuestro hermano Evo Morales, ayudado, coadyuvado y expresado la solidaridad y por supuesto encaminado la unidad en toda América del Sur, que contagiaba a toda Latinoamérica y por supuesto al norte, pero lamentablemente la ambición de algunos políticos que detentan el poder económico y político se ha sobrepuesto y ha generado división en diferentes países de Latinoamérica y el Caribe a los grupos de izquierda. Nosotros tenemos la larga experiencia de los movimientos campesinos, movimientos sociales y grupos de izquierda de los años 80 y 90, cuando éramos sometidos en Bolivia, precisamente con la dominación de algunos grupos que estaba presente USAID y por supuesto también emplazado bases militares de Estados Unidos en Chimoré, Bolivia. ¿Y cómo es posible que el movimiento campesino y los pueblos indígenas y grupos de izquierda podían haberse organizado cuando estaban cooptados, con prebendas, con cargos y por supuesto encarcelados, aquel que levantaba la voz reclamando sus derechos? Por eso nosotros desde Bolivia por lo menos yo, desde muy niño, conocí de cerca las luchas de nuestros padres de manera inclaudicable e incansable. Unidad sobre todas las cosas. Hemos aprendido que la unidad es las grandes corporaciones en nuestro país, sometiendo a los pueblos indígenas. Ha sido evidente el accionar de los gobiernos neoliberales en Bolivia, manejados por fuerzas extranjeras, para que el movimiento campesino se unifique en torno a Evo. Finalmente, en diciembre del año 2005, a la cabeza de nuestro hermano Evo, logramos ganar en toda la historia de Bolivia, desde la creación de la República, a la cabeza de nuestro hermano Evo, con más del 50%. Por eso yo destaco la participación de los jóvenes, de las mujeres y de los movimientos y de los pueblos indígenas particularmente y movimientos sociales a partir de la aprobación de la nueva Constitución Política del Estado del 2009. Ni bien asume Evo, nacionaliza los hidrocarburos, que estaba en manos de grandes corporaciones, en manos de fuerzas extranjeras. Más del 80% de recursos y de utilidades de los hidrocarburos se iban precisamente a las empresas transnacionales. A partir de la nacionalización se revierte más del 80% para el pueblo boliviano y por eso el apoyo contundente de todos los movimientos sociales de Bolivia hacia el movimiento al socialismo a la cabeza de nuestro hermano Evo Morales ha empezado a irradiar el cambio estructural en política con la aprobación de una nueva constitución política del Estado, donde los jóvenes no estaban precisamente en la anterior constitución de Bolivia enmarcados para la participación en espacios decisivos, mucho menos las mujeres y los pueblos indígenas. Entonces, en esa nueva constitución política del Estado hemos contemplado que los jóvenes, mujeres y pueblos indígenas tienen el mismo derecho, absolutamente como todos. En su momento, en aquel tiempo de los años 90, ellos expresaban el movimiento político tradicional de que aquí están los que saben de Estado, de administración de Estado, de economía. Los campesinos indígenas ahí a un lado. Por nada más han creado un Ministerio de Asuntos Campesinos. O sea, las mujeres, los campesinos, los indígenas eran cualquier cosa. Entonces, por eso ese sentimiento a unísono empezó a generar en Bolivia y por eso mismo yo quiero extender mi satisfacción de estar presente y ver a tantos jóvenes acá y compartir esta experiencia de Bolivia. A partir de 2005, 2006, 2009 hemos empezado a generar grandes cambios en Bolivia y eso precisamente no ha sido de gran satisfacción para muchos políticos de la derecha internacional de toda América Latina y el rol de la OEA en este momento es cuestionado a nivel nacional en Bolivia y a nivel internacional y saludamos a la Cámara de Representantes de Estados Unidos, quienes también están promoviendo la investigación del rol de la OEA y de su misión electoral en las elecciones de 2019 que ha desembocado en un golpe de Estado. Dijeron que el MAS murió porque Evo se fue. Nosotros no claudicamos en ningún momento. Por eso cuando nuestro hermano Evo salió de Bolivia para salvar su vida, muchos jóvenes tomamos la batuta y decían, no, Evo se fue, por tanto murió el partido político del MAS. Y nosotros dijimos, Evo está presente en cada uno de nosotros. Evo está presente en miles de jóvenes, en millones de pueblos indígenas. Y las elecciones que se vienen, nuevamente vamos a ganar porque así lo decida el pueblo. El pueblo tiene que retornar al poder y la verdadera lucha por la recuperación de la democracia se ha concretado en las elecciones de 2020 a la cabeza de nuestro presidente ahora, Luis Arce Catacora, y nuestro líder histórico Evo Morales, y todos los jóvenes, hombres y mujeres, hemos logrado nuevamente retomar este camino de la democracia y la participación de los jóvenes y mujeres y el pueblo gobernando al pueblo. Por eso, nuestra experiencia de Bolivia, esperemos que se pueda transmitir en otros países de Latinoamérica y toda América. Y agradezco, querido hermano, a ustedes que están organizando este tipo de eventos, pueda recorrer a toda Latinoamérica y irradiar precisamente esa unidad que se materialice en la práctica para que estos pueblos de Latinoamérica y América empiecen definitivamente a entumbarse hacia un camino con la propia autodeterminación y respetado su soberanía, poder concretar el desarrollo y progreso sostenible. No es posible que Cuba hasta hoy, más de 50 años, esté con el bloqueo, sancionado Venezuela. Ahora la Cumbre de las Américas no invitan a Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela. Por tanto, siendo solidarios como Bolivia, tomó la decisión también nuestro presidente Lucho Arce de no ser parte, porque no se puede llamar Cumbre de las Américas si se excluye a unos, se invita a otros. Y lo que está pasando en el mundo entero nos debe llamar la atención. Veo acá a una hermana de Palestina, en qué situación se encuentra Palestina a través de Israel, con fuerzas extranjeras dominando, sometiendo a países, en qué quedó Medio Oriente. La situación de Latinoamérica no es para menos. Venezuela está sufriendo la arremetida precisamente de fuerzas extranjeras. No es posible que algunos políticos con su ambición puedan imponer la voluntad de las mayorías en toda América. Por eso, todos absolutamente debemos estar a la altura de la demanda y de la exigencia de los nuevos tiempos. Es tiempo de los pueblos, es tiempo de unidad, no de división. Es tiempo de decisiones conjuntas y no de imposiciones unilaterales. Queridos hermanos y hermanas, a todos los presentes que están constituidos en la ciudad de Los Ángeles, América, Latinoamérica, Sudamérica o Norteamérica, esta tierra es de estos pueblos originarios, de estos pueblos diversos que desde, por supuesto, mal llamado descubrimiento o encubrimiento de América, miles y millones de pueblos indígenas han sido sometidos. Y esa visión y esa posición política e ideológica ha sido precisamente empañado por la ambición de algunos políticos. Yo quiero agradecer a cada uno de ustedes y ese despertar de los pueblos de América del Sur, de Latinoamérica, empiece a irradiar a toda América y al mundo entero. Es tiempo de los pueblos, no de imperios. Precisamente por ello estamos acá, queridos hermanos y hermanas, y agradezco la invitación y muchísimas gracias. Yo estoy como presidente de la Cámara de Senadores del Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia, con un mandato del pueblo precisamente para cumplir esa demanda que tiene nuestro pueblo, no solo de Bolivia, sino a toda Latinoamérica. Hay que hacer realidad la unidad de toda Latinoamérica y de toda América, queridos hermanos, y precisamente esta generación debemos estar presentes y latentes a la altura de la exigencia de los nuevos tiempos. Muchísimas gracias, felicidades a todos, a cada uno de ustedes. ¡Que vivan los pueblos de América! Muchísimas gracias, querido hermano.
¡Que vivan nuestros pueblos! Long live the peoples of this continent! ¡Viva Bolivia! ¡Que viva! Dear comrades, we're beginning our program officially. We ask you to stay in this same hall as we start the first panel, Democracy for Who? We're going to have amazing speakers, and Comrade Sheila is going to be the chair of this panel. So stay tight, and we're going to begin in a minute.
Nice to meet you. I'm gonna show a video. Okay. And then you go first. Okay. And then Filolina. And then Xochitl. Wait, is that right? And then Filolina, Gail, and then Xochitl. Yes, so it is. So we're showing a video from Christina. And then we do. Good? Should I start? Okay. Alina. Wait, actually, I have a highlighter. Alina. Evelina. Gail. And then Xochitl. All right, everyone. Let's get started on our first panel. It was truly appropriate for us to start off the People's Summit by having a discussion titled Democracy for Who? The Consequences of U.S. Intervention in the Americas. So we have to start by talking about what the OAS actually is. The OAS is the Organization of American States, which was formed in 1948 to carry out the interests and the agenda of the U.S. government across the continent. In the name of so-called democracy, the OAS carries out the work of the CIA in overthrowing governments that dare to contradict the interests of the United States. It means interfering in mass popular people's movements of working class people, of the peasantry. It means orchestrating coups against democratically elected leaders and pushing forward sanctions that strangle the livelihood of everyday people. What kind of democracy is that? So we are here today because we know this sort of injustice can no longer be tolerated. As brutal as the OAS is, it only makes the people want to fight harder, to resist harder, to fight back, and makes the people of our continent even stronger. And we will keep fighting the OAS until it is abolished. It is time to abolish the OAS. There will be no imposition of force upon us without a fight from our people. And that is exactly the fight that has broken the legitimacy of the US dominance in this region. We're seeing this with the failure of the Summit of the Americas. We do not need any more institutions that interfere with the will of our people and that aid imperialist projects of destruction of our earth, of the displacement of our people. We are watching the US government make a fool of itself on this world stage, on this failed summit. And it is to this end that I'd like to say that the OAS is nothing but a tool of destruction against the people, and this is why we say we must abolish the OAS. So first, I'd like to start off this panel with a video message from Cristina Escobar Dominguez, who is a Cuban journalist specializing in international issues. Dominguez is a Cuban television presenter and one of the hosts of Mesa Redonda program. She is the first journalist from Cuba who, after 54 years, was able to ask on May 21st, 2015, a question to the White House spokesman at a press conference in Washington. And the reason why we are receiving this video message instead of receiving her in person is because our delegation, our invitees of Cuban delegates who were invited to our summit were denied their visas because the US government does not want us to hear the opinions of our Cuban delegation. So this is why, exactly. So this is why we're gonna break the blockade by showing a video message from our friends. It's not gonna stop us.
Thank you for inviting me, even though the government of the country in which that event is happening has closed its doors to us. It's fine, we're kind of used to that. My name is Cristina. I was born in Havana in a working class neighborhood. My house was located at the corner of two streets with the most intriguing names, Reform and Commitment, kind of hinting at what my life was going to be about. I studied journalism here in Havana and then I did a master's in London. I went through college to get my bachelor degree in journalism without paying a penny, and I have never seen a gunfire in my life. I am a member of the Cuban Union of Journalists, and I am also a mom of a talkative 2-year-old baby. The name of this panel leaves room for so many stories. The cost of the US interventions in my country is impossible to cover in 5 minutes. I'll try to give you a glimpse using a few examples from my own life. My entry into activism was as a demonstrator in front of the US diplomatic headquarters here in Havana. It was 1999 and a 5-year-old boy was taken by his mother across the Florida Straits to get to Miami. They all died except the boy who survived miraculously and got to Miami and to family that did not even know him and used him as an opportunity for self-promotion, political traction, and money. They refused to return him to his father, who was anxiously demanding his return. The Cuban leader, Fidel Castro, foresaw that the only way to get the boy back was by a massive and visible rejection of his kidnapping. A kidnapping, by the way, behind which stood a very well-funded Cuban-American lobby. I demonstrated for days, for weeks. After a long battle, until finally then President Bill Clinton himself said that the boy belonged to his father and the FBI had to break into the house and get him. He's today a healthy, happy father of a newborn. I was in my early teens and an experience pushed me to a point where I had to take part. I had to get involved, and it was for the right cause. My life has been marked by austerity and resilience, as that of the majority of Cubans, because of the many obstacles the US sanctions have imposed. This country is under the most comprehensive and extensive system of sanctions ever imposed by the most powerful country of the world. The resilience of the Cuban people should be studied by experts because it's exceptional. When the presidents of the United States and Cuba announced their rapprochement December 17, 2014, it was history in the making. At that time, I covered Cuba-US relations, and I spent those months watching a clear change in strategy, but not of purpose. Regime change in Cuba, not allowing this country to be fully independent, not accepting our chosen path of social justice. Those are stones stuck in the craw of every American president since 1959. But Barack Obama was brave enough to not use Florida as an excuse and to open up a different strategy consistent with US national interests. Still, the sanctions were left intact, and unexplained health incidents that have been seen all over the world, including the US, were used as an excuse to close down consular services and so close the doors of the US to Cubans. Donald Trump took to the relations between the two countries to its worst point probably in 30 years. And Joe Biden has left everything as it was without having the courage to craft his own strategy on Cuba. Two final examples. In the middle of the pandemic, the only medical oxygen plant in Cuba broke down. People died in hospitals because of the lack of oxygen. During those same days, Washington refused to sell ventilators to Cuba, using COVID-19 as the perfect ally to promote such desperation that some people turned on their own government. Again, the resilience of these people created another epic story invisible to the mainstream international media. Cuba created 3 safe vaccines and has immunized more than 80% of its population with homegrown vaccines. Search around. You will not find another such crazy success story. And one final example. This one is not easy for me. My best friend had a baby 3 years ago. She's a bright and curious toddler, but she needs a liver transplant, which is something can be done in Cuba, though it is thought of as a first world surgery. The only obstacle is a small number of surgical supplies and drugs that are almost impossible to get because of the sanctions. And that brings us back to the embargo or blockade. Designed to promote regime change, an embargo, they say, is directed against the government. What makes harder, if not impossible, for a 3-year-old toddler to get a liver transplant that can save her life. One last idea. Cuba has many domestic challenges. We must grow into accepting more criticism. We need a press model more adjusted to our young audiences. We must think beyond the besieged square perspective. They say the purpose is to see this country becoming a democracy, but in this context, it means subordination to Washington's interests. I do believe in freedom, in democracy, the real thing, and in improving many things in my own country. Seeing it thrive is a dream that inspires me and makes me endure many sacrifices. They say we're terrorists, they put us on the list, they say we're anti-democratic, but they don't let us go there to the United States to speak up. They say we only accept one way of thinking, but then they adopt and sponsor opposition in Cuba, making it a very well-paid job. One final idea, and this is the message. All of you can become ambassadors of the truth of Cuba. And this is what we want to say. Let us live and figure out the solution to our own problems. Thank you again for this opportunity and for the bravery of standing against injustice. I'm sure we will see each other sometime soon. Thank you.
Viva Fidel! Well, thank you for that message, and just wanted to uplift the fact that we need to continue the fight against this blockade on Cuba. It is criminal. It is criminal, the things that she has described of what the Cuban people have to endure, yet still be able to provide for their people. It is incredible, and it is a model that we need to fight for. So, next, I'd like to introduce Alina Duarte. Alina is a feminist, socialist, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, anti-fascist, independent journalist from Xochimilco. Xochimilco. Duarte has dedicated herself to journalism since 2012, covering social movements and political situations from the ground in several countries of Latin America, including Bolivia, Chile, Ecuador, Mexico, and Venezuela. She was a correspondent for Telesur from 2017 to 2019, and she is currently a senior research fellow at the Council on Hemispheric Affairs. Please welcome Alina.
Well, thanks. Thanks to you all for being here. Thanks to all the amazing comrades who made this possible. and sorry in advance with the translators because I speak real fast in Spanish, but I'm gonna try to do my best. Yo soy Alina Duarte, yo soy de Xochimilco, de un lugar muy bello al sur de la Ciudad de México. Y es bello no solo por sus ríos, canales, ¿no? En realidad, sino por sus resistencias y sus rebeldías. Y desde ahí trato de comunicar en varios espacios, desde ahí he ejercido mi militancia y desde ahí he tenido el placer de estar en la primera línea informativa, no solo en México, sino en distintas latitudes, en América Latina y aquí en Estados Unidos, donde estuve viviendo por varios años y conocí a muchos y muchas de ustedes que están tratando de transformar este imperio de raíz. Preguntarse, es una gran pregunta la que nos han puesto en este panel, ¿democracia para quién? No es fácil, nos pusieron ahí el dedo en la llaga, ¿no? ¿Democracia para quién? Preguntárselo además desde Los Ángeles, un territorio robado, ¿no? Ocupado. Las fronteras nosotros no las atravesamos, la frontera nos atravesó a nosotros y eso hay que tenerlo claro. También nos estamos preguntando, ¿democracia para quién? Desde Estados Unidos, un territorio que se ha construido sobre el genocidio de sus pueblos originarios, sobre la esclavitud y también con esa fuerza migrante que hoy criminalizan, que a mitad de una pandemia le llaman trabajadores esenciales, pero después les criminalizan, les persiguen, nos deportan. Eso es realmente el sueño americano, un bello guión de Hollywood, pero en realidad una pesadilla para millones dentro y fuera de Estados Unidos. Hoy estamos reunidas en este espacio, el cual me alegra y me llena de mucha emoción, me pone muy nerviosa ver a tanta gente tan increíble que está haciendo tanto trabajo en todo el mundo. Gracias y nos dieron el pretexto, lo decían hace rato los camaradas, gracias a una cumbre de la exclusión, una cumbre imperialista que nace en Miami en 1994 y que pretende dictar esas medidas económicas, políticas, sociales alrededor del continente y quiere hacer de la doctrina Monroe una realidad en pleno siglo XXI. Esa doctrina Monroe que ya no aguanta más, que ya les enseñamos que esa no es la vía, ese no es el camino para construir en nuestro territorio. Estamos aquí hablando sobre
States does in our territories. When the United States put their democracy flag and human rights on the one side, it has all the mics on a global scale to say what is democracy and what is human rights. Well, they orchestrate coup d'etats and they destabilize governments that have been democratically elected, but it's beyond their borders. We have to leave clear that U.S. imperialism also attacks inside their own territory. Not only kills and does coup d'etat, they also negate people's right to housing, to health here in the United States, and to a dignified life. And that doesn't, you don't see it on CNN, you don't see it on the news, you don't see it, you don't see Skid Row, you don't see the brutal images that militant journalists actually do. Democracy made in USA has meant throughout the decades systemic killings of those that have been historically excluded. It has meant coup d'etats to Manuel Zelaya. It has meant coup d'etat against Evo Morales, but more than anything to their peoples, the Chilean peoples, the Brazilian people, that not only they were applied in the last year in other latitudes, but that they're still present today. These institutions, these politicals and judicial against governments that have been democratically elected is something that is still happening today. And here today in Mexico, I see it with a lot of worry. In Mexico, the Marco Rubio senator has come to say that that Mexico is a dictatorship. They came out to say the same. Of the original peoples, is the time of the working class, is the time of the media that are feminist and militant, that are committed to their communities. This is the revolution, people, and I know that we're willing, and I know we were going to win until death. Muchas gracias, Alina. Muchas gracias. Eso fue.
And you're right, we can build another world. Another world is possible, and we can see it here today, right? So next, I'd like to introduce Fidelina Mena Corrales from Costa Rica. Fidelina is a director of the Center for Labor Rights. She studied law at the Faculty of Law of the Universidad de la Salle in Costa Rica, with extensive experience in human rights issues, especially refugee and migration, as well as in the defense of labor rights of migrant workers, applicants, and refugees, migrant indigenous populations, and Afro-descendants. Please welcome Fidelina.
Muchas gracias de verdad por esta invitación que nos hacen a esta cumbre de los pueblos. En realidad, agradecer a cada uno de los y las organizadoras y las personas voluntarias y quien ha dado un 5 por poder estar aquí reunidos. En realidad, como pueblo latinoamericano, americano y del Caribe, que también es parte de las Américas, aunque no hablen en español, estamos conscientes y presentes de que queremos hacer un solo pueblo y luchamos desde nuestro ámbito, que es un poco más sesgado hacia aquella persona que migra o aquella persona que está en su país y que tiene el derecho a trabajar para poder vivir y que se reparta la riqueza. Así que muchas gracias. Voy a contextualizarles un poco y, como decía la compañera, la palabra o el panel de Democracia para Quién es bastante ambicioso, pero desde una región
but from a
del
region
sur de
on
América
the sur
Central
of
que
the
quizás
South
acá
America and
en
Central
Estados
America, then
Unidos
maybe here in the
no
United States and other
conocen
region, they don't know a little bit of the reality of the peoples, whether they're migrant, that have been displaced by political forces of the government. We're going to learn a little bit on our. Let's imagine together a little piece of earth that only it's 5,000 square kilometers, a little bit smaller, with a population of 5 million people, where one of the million and a little bit more are foreign people,
de las cuales
of whom
encuentra
you
entre
can
el medio
find
de un Panamá
they are in between a Panama that
en
is
la parte del
in the cross between
donde se quedan
Korean, where there's a lot of people, a lot of death and trafficking of those people that are coming from different continents and from South America, in South America, to are going for that famous American dream in the United States, and
y el otro lado
and on the other side,
al norte con
we're at the north with Nicaragua, which that country is also in suffering for 1,000 reasons. Historically, people coming out of their country. In 1 year, Costa Rica received 170,000 people, refugee seekers, to see how they can survive and get better. But Costa Rica, inside their own space, is not available to do this because it also has they have political power that is being dictated from the exteriors. So there's people that have to abandon Costa Rica to be able to feed themselves. The homelessness that you can see here in Los Angeles, where there's a housing crisis, when there's no work for a lot of people, and that's the same thing that happens in Costa Rica. And I see it because we are looking for Costa Rica, and when they say Costa Rica pura vida, Costa Rica great life, Costa Rica, but Costa Rica also has a bunch of issues because it's a country that generally is a place of destination. They want to be like the United States. If the United States tell us a migration law against the population, Costa Rica also does it. If the United States put military people in their borders, Costa Rica doesn't have military. Costa Rica is the only country that doesn't have a military, but it has a lot of policemen that are on the borders. That you don't need a military to be able to not allow the entry and execute their migrant right to migrate to get a better life. And what favors us in the countries, in the name of our organization and social organizations, that we are human rights defenders, and we fight against these big regions. We also want to learn and to call out the violations and the abuse, especially of those that are inside on American countries, and those people that are looking an economic migration, but that they have to be displaced. They get refuge in our countries. Also, characterized for those indigenous peoples that are migrant. Costa Rican coffee. Also, it's internationally being picked by migrant indigenous workers. That for that they're good. They're good for being specialized as coffee pickers, where they get paid less than $1 for picking a lot of coffee, but that is sold in thousands and thousands of coronas and dollars to other countries. We've never be able to talk of the structural causes. We also have to have that present and to be against to speak up against the governments. We have to say that those policies, policies that are not inclusive and that are inclusive, are not inclusive, are the ones that create these poverties that we can see in our peoples. We work to ameliorate that gap in the economic because us workers, we are, sorry, interpreter didn't understand. If you hear the minimum wage in our region, we didn't ask anything more. We asked only for people to comply with the minimum wage, and this is where we always have to remind them. While you only govern for some, democracy will never exist. Our governments. Our governments attacked us. They don't attack the real issue, structural issues, because they don't want to. They simply, what they're interested is to legislate and to create a democracy for a few, a democracy for the economy. Today I feel free here speaking and saying, expressing the emotions of the peoples, because I know that we're all a peoples and that we all using this cause, which is to fight injustice of those and that have to earn their wage justly. And I can assure you that a couple of blocks from there, they're going to be speaking and from a diplomacy, because they won't know if the president of X country is going to question me, or what am I going to see in the United States. And how shameful it could be for a country like for us, like Costa Rica, to come to speak and to say and to shut down the circumstances of the people just because to ask for some money so they can give you some type of program. It's very shameful to see that our politicians that cannot attack those structural causes for us to only have some money from Spanish corporation. And I finish with this, is that we have to ask ourselves about the democracy for whom? For those that manipulate the economical systems, for those that don't respect their own laws that were created, for those that govern and they don't want, they are unfazed against injustice. No, we demand democracy for the working class people, for the peasant. We're not asking for privileges. We're only demanding is that give us for right for what we deserve, that don't they take us, that they abide by the law. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Fidelina. Estamos exigiendo una democracia para el pueblo, no solo una democracia para los políticos. A continuación quisiera presentar a Gail Walker. Gail es la directora ejecutiva.
Gail worked with IFCO from 1987 to 2002 as a communications director and co-led the 1988 IFCO delegation to Nicaragua that resulted in the formation of the Pastors for Peace Project. At IFCO, she has led a number of delegations to Central America and Cuba, including Cuba Friendship Caravans and educational delegations to Cuba. Please welcome Gail.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much to the organizers. This is a tremendous, you all look great. I mean, we've got this vantage point. I mean, I had to take a picture. I had to do a little, so I just want you to know you look good. We're going to do a selfie later. But I really want to thank the organizers of this event. It's so important that we're all here. And yes, how indeed appropriate it is to begin this summit, this People's Summit, by addressing the impact of U.S. Policy in the Americas and defining what we, us, the people, mean when we speak of democracy. We're here because we have the right and the responsibility to reclaim what constitutes the people's definition of democracy, right? I think Cuba's national hero and freedom fighter, Jose Marti, gave us a tremendous launching point when we speak when he spoke about the concept of Nuestra America, which is very inclusive and completely disrupts the concept of manifest destiny that the U.S. uses in an effort to erase the rich diversity that is our hemisphere. Martí rallied and fought and died for a free Cuba in the same vein that Toussaint Louverture and Dessalines fought in Haiti to spark the light for the rest of this hemisphere, and as Simón Bolívar in Venezuela as well. So we are inheritors, all of us are inheritors of a legacy of liberation that has been brutally disrupted. But we are at a turning point historically that gives me hope, and I hope it gives all of you hope as well. Hope that the perils of the many oppressed in this part of the world are awakening to the courageous and rebelliousness that is in our ancestral DNA. And that's something we need to claim, right? That's something we need to kind of keep in our mind forefront. The work is hard and the transformation takes time, but we remember the sacrifice of freedom fighters like the great Fannie Lou Hamer. How many people know Fannie Lou Hamer? Love her. She lived the horrors of the lack of democracy that oppressed people have always known in the United States. The United Snakes, as my dear friend Mahmoud refers to them. I like that. And knew what she was talking about when she said, nobody's free until we're all free. All right? Our coming together here is an example of the change that is manifesting. The Biden administration's summit of exclusion is being held across town right now, while we the people are emboldened by the fact that we are gathering here at this People Summit to lift up the crucial issues impacting those of us who have been left out, neglected, marginalized by the world's wealthy power brokers, power holders. Meanwhile, as you all know, we have noted over the last several months that there's a lot of change that's been going on as it relates leading up to this summit of exclusion. The leaders of dozens of nations across the Americas have announced that they will not attend Biden's meeting, and others have criticized the exclusion of our sister nations. The reaction of the region's leaders reflect the continuing decline of Washington's control over the Western Hemisphere. Now, while nations that have been excluded, namely, we know Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua, aren't interested in attending Biden's summit anyway, it is clear that the region has responded loudly, clearly, and forcefully to the U.S.'s utter arrogance. But the harsh response of Biden's snub doesn't just end with other nations. 3 senior members of his own party drafted a congressional letter recently to Biden, signed by dozens of members of Congress expressing concern about the omission of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua at this summit, and stating that it could undermine the U.S.'s standing in the region. This is his own party that's referring to this. And of course, even the New York Times, right, their newspaper, said Biden's summit is threatening to deliver a humiliating blow to the White House. Decades ago, the always prophetic Fidel Castro rightly called the OAS, right, the U.S. Ministry of Colonies. I mean, how brilliant, right? Did he lay it out or did he lay it out? And the thing is that over the years, the reality has become increasingly clear for the rest of the hemisphere, and indeed the rest of the world, that mentality, that understanding. Still, ironically, on the other hand, there is a positive impact, believe it or not, of U.S. policy that it's had on those of us engaged in real grassroots movement building around the world, helping to increase our knowledge of the impact of U.S. hegemony and the commitment to fight for a different and better world. Like David did with Goliath, there have been times when we've successfully pushed back against injustice and won. We know that one of the oldest Cuba Solidarity organizations to date, the Venceremos Brigade, did so when it engaged in traveling challenges to go to Cuba as an act of solidarity, right? Standing in solidarity with our Cuban brothers and sisters, and shortly after the triumph of the Cuban Revolution in '59. Against all odds, the organization I work with, IFCO Pastors for Peace, for more than 35 years, has organized caravans, transshipment caravans to Nicaragua, to El Salvador, to Honduras, to Guatemala, to Chiapas, and of course to Cuba, all as a way to express the will, the true will of the vast majority of the people in this country in solidarity with the authentic people of the Americas. Right? We've stood up, we've acted out, we've faced fines and imprisonment to challenge US laws that have translated into decades of abuse through its genocidal blockade. Through those caravans, we, the people, have expressed an alternative foreign policy initiative. Our internal movement participated in the fight, as it was mentioned by our sister Christina, the return of little Elian Gonzalez to his family and his homeland. And of course, the fight to win the release of the Cuban Five was also very much at the forefront of the efforts of our solidarity movement. We've raised funds to purchase much needed medical aid to assist Cuba, especially during the pandemic. And we've organized monthly actions in support of Cuba through webinars and car caravans, cruzando puentes de amor con nuestra familia cubana. So what does real democracy look like? Annually, the world's nations tells us what democracy looks like when the UN General Assembly votes to condemn the US government's relentless blockade. Equally, poll after poll has shown that the majority of people in the United States opposes the US government's blockade and sees it as a political tool that only benefits US politicians and right-wing Cubans based in the US who want to overthrow the Cuban government. But we, the people, refuse to stand by and allow the US to control the narrative about democracy. The truth is, Cuba lights the way, right? Cuba is an example. And those of you who have had the opportunity, how many have had the opportunity to actually travel to Cuba? All right, there's not enough hands up. So y'all need to come with us, whether you're going with the caravan, you're going with the brigade, or you're going with whomever. I think it's important for us as people who are righteously committed to justice to see the example of what it is that Cuba offers us. In the midst of the pandemic, this tiny but mighty nation, as was mentioned, developed vaccines to fight COVID, to make it available and to make them available to the global South. And Cuba's example of selflessness represents a threat to what the US at its core represents, and that is a capitalist monopoly. Two last things I want to raise real quickly. I'm feeling the heat. Y'all got me so, I'm hyped up. I'm hyped up because I think this is such an important place for us to be, right? So I'm going to ask for just a little grace.
We'll give you 2 minutes.
I just want you'll give me 2. Okay. Apparently, because I think this is an important story, apparently ignorant or dismissive of Cuba's stellar work of creating its vaccines, the US government offered Cuba a limited number of US-made vaccines with conditions, of course. The Cubans, being the Cubans, patiently replied, no thanks, but said, hey, if you're really serious about fighting vaccine apartheid, join with us and let's provide vaccines for our friends in Haiti who have less than 5% has actually been vaccinated. And of course, the US response was radio silence. There's so many examples of the ways in which the US has completely tried to monopolize the reality, the vision, the voice of what it is that Cuba represents. One final example that I want to refer to is Cuba's work to amend its constitution to include a robust change in the family code, designed, right, many of you know about that, designed to recognize the rights of families that traditionally have not been acknowledged. Among other things, that code will allow maternity leave for family members and care for children. The code will highlight the rights of the elderly, the youth, the queer community. Imagine those of us here fighting, right, for justice, those of us fighting to maintain the reproductive rights, those of us who are here to defend the rights of the LGBT family members. Cuba provides a tremendous example. Cuba has done this because they have worked as a participatory democracy, right? They have worked with the committees in defense of the revolution to make sure that information is being spread, that there's a conversation, a discussion going on about what it is that Cuba wants for its nation. That's an example of what we need here, certainly in the United States, and I think in our Americas. So friends, I'll end by just saying, this is what democracy, participatory democracy, actually looks like. And as we fight for real, fundamental change in this country, we dare not forget the lessons that we have learned from our Cuban family, including Jose Marti, who reminds us of the value of the collective, with all, for the good of all. So gracias, Cuba, por su ejemplo. Estamos juntos. Cuba no está sola. Venceremos. Together we will win.
Yes.
Viva!
All right. Thank you so much, Gail, and thank you for teaching us and teaching us the lessons that we've learned from Cuba. And we cannot leave Cuba behind. We must take those lessons forward. Exactly, exactly. We need Puerto Rican independence. So, finally, I'd like to welcome our last speaker, Xochitl Sanchez. Xochitl is a senior organizer at Carecen LA, one of our steering committee organizations, the Central American Resource Center in Los Angeles. She works on the TPS to Residency Now campaign and was the co-lead of the Refugee Project, in which she coordinated humanitarian legal and medical brigades to serve asylum seekers at the US-Mexico border. She is an internationalist, an anti-imperialist, active in transnational solidarity efforts in Honduras, El Salvador, and Cuba. Please welcome Xochitl.
Thank you, thank you. Can folks hear me okay? All of y'all can hear me? Awesome. How incredible it is that we get to meet here 2 years into a global pandemic, right? We're survivors. And so I want to acknowledge that. On top of that, in the shadows of the Ukraine-NATO-Russia conflict, as I like to call it, World War III, right? That has already started. And just to start, want to contextualize that this is a reminder of what happened in the Cold War, where we saw posturing between two massive entities, the US and the USSR, but we experienced a hot war in Central America. One where the US militarily intervened and used all of its money and power and arms and training to be able to secure what they consider to be their backyard, which is the case for, unfortunately, what happened in Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and we cannot forget Panama with the taking of the Panama Canal, for the sake of being able to secure safe transfer and movement of commodities, but not of people. So I want to start with that. Beyond that, the US took a big step back when it came down to reconstruction, right after we bombed all of these countries and funded mass genocide of indigenous people, forcibly displacing people, leading to mass migration out of the region. We then said, oh, well, you get to take care of it yourselves. And this welcomed private industry to be able to buy off land and create their mega projects. Now that the people who used to live there now conveniently were all massacred or disappeared or immigrated out of that territory, out of those spaces. And that was very intentional. It was intentional to be able to allow for corporations to take and occupy these lands for the sake of making money out of what they know to be a very, very wealthy space and region. Central America happens to be, if folks have been there, if you're from there, we know that it's absolutely beautiful, and it has so many resources that will be able to allow for people to live their lives in dignity and in wealth, right? People can live well. So many expat retirees from the US live well in Costa Rica, right? So why can't the people of Central America be able to have that same privilege? Again, it's very intentional, the desbasteo, a forced removal of people from their territories. And Central America is an example, but we see that across the world, in Africa, and the Middle East, and Eurasia, and the Caribbean, the ongoing occupation of Haiti, which is criminal, absolutely criminal. And on top of that, we continue to deport people back to these countries, acknowledging that it's unsafe for US citizens to travel there, but it is safe enough for us to be able to deport people back. When it comes down to it, the United States has weaponized democracy as a tool to be able to justify political intervention in a number of different countries. And when it comes down to the case of Central America, the most recent in Honduras, with the coup of 2009, where the OAS also se prestó, right, to be able to justify having a president, a democratically elected president, Manuel Zelaya, be driven out of his own country for the sake of retaking a territory that the United States feels is rightfully theirs. And we see that very clearly in the case of Honduras with the Sotocano Naval Base, the largest military base in Central America, where they have US Marines living and training there, where they have their fortresses when it comes down to the US embassies throughout the region to be able to continue their stronghold in the region in case something like the Cold War happened again, and we're seeing that now. And so that's what leads to this very troublesome pattern, unfortunately, of forced migration that has continued. And I think most recently I'm gonna stick with the case of Honduras, where we have caravans. When people decide to organize on foot, thousands of people sending flyers throughout Facebook to meet at the plaza, we're walking out together. We need to question why that is, and not why people are arriving to that border. We need to question why they're organizing themselves to fight for their right to live anywhere, because they do not have the conditions to live in their own country. And so the fact that the global pandemic has been used also as a way to obstruct the right of movement, we need to acknowledge was, again, an opportunity that the US took to be able to say, now is the time to militarize the borders, right? The caravans arrived in 2018. Our organization went down there to provide humanitarian assistance and just basic know your rights, legal knowledge to people who are there, and medical attention, but it was not enough. It was a grain of sand, and what the need is there and continuing. And on top of that, we have the pandemic in 2020, Title 42, and Remain in Mexico, that has been used against, weaponized, again, to refuse a right to entry to Black immigrants more than anything, Central American immigrants and Mexican immigrants that we cannot forget. People are leaving out of Mexico as well and not receiving any type of protection when it comes down to the United States. They are Mexican refugees, they also exist. Has been used now in this context to be able to say, you have no right to entry because of the COVID pandemic, cough, cough, you're gonna get us sick, you guys are not vaccinated, right? But when the Ukraine-Russia conflict began, white people got rolled out the red carpet. And they were allowed to enter so easily, with so much humanity, with so many material resources, that the blatant racism has to slap you in the face. And the United States under the Biden administration has shown its teeth. This is not a passive administration. No. This is an actively racist administration. And the fact that so many Black and brown people galvanized to vote this demon into power in light of the other demon that we wanted to get out of power, right, it shows the strength and power that we have. We made that happen. And when it comes down to it, we get to elect the people, at least in some way, that represent us. And they're not gonna represent us anymore, right? They've failed us.
That's right.
And they continue to show that the United States government will maintain its posturing against other countries, Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela, that decided, hey, that what y'all are doing politically is not what we want to do politically. What's up with that? Like, what's the problem with that, right? There have been dictators across the world that the United States has supported, but we decide, and we had our own dictator in Donald Trump, potential dictator in Biden, let's see what he does, right? But they get to name who those people are and demonize them against capitalism. And what is capitalism to us, right? How has it saved or helped us? And how, especially in the light of COVID-19, where in the United States, we like to be proud of how we're a model, a first world model, and the largest number of deaths happen in this country. The biggest neglect, gross medical neglect of the most vulnerable happened in this country with more than enough material resources to be able to prevent that. We chose not to. That was an intentional choice of our government. So when it comes down to it, I think that we need to acknowledge that when it comes out to the case of Central America, just going back to my notes here, I want to thank the people, the role of civil society, los compas en la lucha in these countries who have done everything possible to be able to take care of themselves and their community and their families. I want to acknowledge organizations that are here right now, Pro Vida, Karen Ramirez, who is an organization that does humanitarian assistance. They started out of the reconstruction projects in El Salvador during the Civil War and now provide humanitarian assistance after natural disasters and other just basic medical needs of people in that country. We also have Simitra here, a worker center from El Salvador as well, organizing workers and being able to help educate them in just their rights across the board. On top of that, I want to highlight the Vamos a la Milpa campaign, a campaign in Honduras that is specifically funding sustainable agriculture, gathering monies to be able to allow the orgs on the ground to do their own work, the work that they want to do to be able to provide food and water and basic needs for their people. And so I just want to highlight and give space to those organizations. To end, I want to say that people, of course, have a right to immigrate, but more than anything, they have a right to stay.
Right.
They have a right to stay in their home countries. They have a right to stay and live lives in dignity and in their own power in the countries that they're from and be able to live in their ancestral lands. And I think that more than anything, that's what we should be fighting for. No more forced displacement. People deserve to live in their own countries of origin. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Xochitl. So I know that we're running a little behind on time, so I do have one question that I want to ask each of the panelists, and maybe we can go line by line, one by one, and then we can answer this question. We have pretty much outlined that the democracy that is put forward by the Summit of the Americas, the democracy that is put forward by the US government is not a democracy for us, right? So what is your vision of democracy? What is your vision for democracy for the people? So that is my question.
Bueno, la democracia para nuestros pueblos tendría que ser vivir con dignidad, vivir en libertad, vivir en paz, tener el derecho a decidir nuestro futuro entre todas y todos sin imposiciones, sin imperialismo, sin capitalismo. La democracia tiene que ser… La democracia tendría que ser el respeto a nuestro territorio.
Democracy has to be respect to our territories, respect to life, and to that manifestation doesn't mean for us to get killed, and for us for people to impose us, that to criminalize us, like in the case of Cuba, like in the case of Venezuela. It will appear that they live in democracy, and that horizon has to do with changing the things inside and outside of the United States. It has to do with building even be without the United States, and I think the solution is like how it will look like, that democracy will look like. It will be like how the women and the men and the young people, and the workers, the peasant, and from the LGBT community, that we're here present. I think this has to do of how to build people's democracy, being all here together. What will be for us a perfect democracy? It will be that democracy where people can really have the access to all of the rights, freedom and real rights, with right to movement, access to economy, that be able to get to obtain their own wealth of the earth, and that it could be produced, and that could be hegemonic, like equal, and that wealth really stays with the people. It's not the new. It's not real, because if it were real, the people that are in power right now will do what the people ask them to, and the people is only asking for what humanly needs to be complied, and which what we have, which is the rights that we are born with. Whichever country that we go, we have our rights. It's not that if I get to a country, is that I'm gonna learn or gonna receive some rights. No, I was born with rights. I move with rights, and I live with rights.
Yeah, I'm just in
So
complete
sí,
agreement with
sí,
the
estoy
compas and what they said. And when it comes down to the case of Central America, we just want to be able to plant our seeds, reap from our land, take care of our rivers, and be able to have work opportunities that are not exploitative and not based on the US dollar. And I think that it's something that is creeping even more to even more of these countries in the region. But we have a very clear case in El Salvador where people are getting paid a minimum wage of $5 a day, and cheese and dairy products are getting closer to $3 or $4 a product. And when it comes down to it, we just want to be able to reap from the land and the riches that we know these corporations get to exploit for ourselves, and not have to be worried about being gunned down either by violence that happens in society or by the state. And that's really my hope.
Thank you. Gail.
What everybody just said. I mean, I just really quickly, I think that really it's all been hit on. It's simple. It's not really a complicated formula. Health, housing, security, the ability to take care of our families, no matter where we live. This is a right that we all universally share, and I think have to work for. Sustainable developments, the right of women, the right of LGBTQ, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that the important issue is that we collectively stand. As I mentioned earlier, the importance of working collectively to push back against injustice is a big part of what we're responsible for doing. There's no doubt in my mind that we're headed in the right direction. And I think that this summit is an indication of that. The reaction of the countries that have said that they are not going to accept the Biden administration's attempts to manipulate the world is unacceptable, and I feel that we're on the right path, in the right direction. It's an honor to be here with these wonderful, beautiful, brilliant women.
Please give our panelists another round of applause. Thank you all so much.
I need food. I need food. I need food. You can try to feed me.
So this concludes this first panel, Democracy for Who. So stay tuned. There's much more programming happening, but that's it. Thank you all.
Thank you. So, you all did great, man. I learned hanging around with you. I got my card somewhere in here. I got this crazy fanny pack. It was supposed to make life easier.